Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Vegeta kept his tail and mastered the oozaru form? Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And also check the description, so let's begin the story. The throne room of planet Vegeta's royal palace gleamed with polished obsidian, its surfaces reflecting the crimson sky that perpetually hung over the Saiyan homeworld. Young Prince Vegeta, barely 5 years old, stood in the center of the vast chamber, his small fists clenched at his sides, blood trickling from a split lip. His dark eyes blazed with fury that seemed far too intense for a child his age. Again, he commanded, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. Across from him, 3 elite Saiyan warriors, each handpicked by King Vegeta himself, exchanged uncertain glances. The tallest, a scarred veteran named Paragus, shifted his weight uncomfortably. Training the prince was an honor, certainly, but the boy's relentless determination bordered on suicidal. They had been sparring for 6 hours without break. "My prince," Paragus began carefully, "perhaps we should," I said again. The force of Vegeta's shout sent a ripple of energy through the chamber. His tail, which had been hanging loosely behind him, suddenly lashed upward like a striking serpent, rigid with tension. The movement caught all 3 warriors' attention. Most young Saiyans had poor control over their tails, treating them as little more than decorative appendages. But the prince's tail moved with purpose, with awareness. Paragus noted this with interest. He had served King Vegeta since before the prince was born, and he had seen something in the royal bloodline that set them apart, an instinctive connection to their most primal heritage. Where common Saiyans viewed their tails as a weakness to be protected, the royal family understood them as a source of untapped strength. "Very well, my prince." Paragus bowed slightly, then launched himself forward. The training resumed with renewed intensity. Vegeta dodged, blocked, and countered with speed that shouldn't have been possible for someone so young. His tail wasn't just an afterthought in his movements, it was integrated into his fighting style. When Paragus swept low, trying to catch the prince off balance, Vegeta's tail wrapped around a nearby pillar, using it as leverage to flip over the attack. When another warrior grabbed for the appendage, hoping to exploit the traditional Saiyan weakness, Vegeta twisted in midair, and his tail proved far stronger than expected, nearly dislocating the warrior's wrist. From the shadows of the throne room's upper gallery, King Vegeta watched his son with a mixture of pride and concern. The king was an imposing figure, his presence commanding even in stillness. His own tail was wrapped securely around his waist, hidden beneath his royal armor, a political necessity in these dangerous times. "He has your fire, my king," said a soft voice beside him. King Vegeta didn't turn to acknowledge his advisor, an elderly Saiyan named Bardock who had served 3 generations of royalty. The old warrior's face bore the scars of countless battles, and his eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen empires rise and fall. "He has more than fire," the king replied quietly. "He has the gift." "The ancient way?" "Yes. I've seen how he moves with it, how he instinctively understands what took me years to learn." King Vegeta's jaw tightened. "But that makes him dangerous. Frieza's spies are everywhere. If they report that my son shows unusual mastery over his oozaru heritage..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Both of them understood the precarious position the Saiyan race occupied under Frieza's rule. The tyrant lord tolerated them as useful warriors, but fear ran beneath that tolerance. Frieza feared the legend of the Super Saiyan, feared the destructive potential of the oozaru form, and most of all, feared anything he couldn't control. Below, Vegeta finally landed a solid hit, his small fist connecting with Paragus's jaw hard enough to send the veteran stumbling backward. The prince didn't celebrate. He simply stood ready, waiting for the next attack, his tail swaying behind him like a metronome measuring his heartbeat. "End the session," King Vegeta commanded, his voice carrying clearly to the training floor despite its normal volume. Such was the power of a king's word in this place. The warriors immediately stepped back and bowed. Vegeta's expression flickered with frustration, but he bowed as well, though less deeply than his training partners. Protocol was protocol, even if he chafed under it. "Dismissed," the king said to the warriors, who gratefully retreated from the chamber. Then, softer, "Come here, my son." Vegeta walked toward his father's observation post, his steps proud despite his exhaustion. He didn't limp, though Bardock could see the boy was favoring his left leg. Pain was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. The prince had learned that lesson well, perhaps too well. King Vegeta descended from the gallery, meeting his son on the main floor. Up close, the resemblance between them was striking. The same proud bearing, the same fierce eyes, the same widow's peak of jet-black hair that seemed to defy gravity. But where the king's face showed the weight of rule and compromise, the prince's showed only pure, undiluted determination. "You fought well," the king said. "I could have done better." Vegeta's tail twitched with irritation. Paragus pulled his strikes. "They all did. Of course they did. You're 5 years old. I'm the prince." Vegeta's voice cracked slightly, betraying his youth despite his composure. "I should be stronger than warriors 3 times my age already." King Vegeta studied his son for a long moment. He saw so much of himself in the boy, but also something more, something that reminded him of the ancient texts, the old stories of Saiyan kings who had ruled before they became Frisia's servants, warriors who had mastered the great ape form so completely that they could harness its power without losing themselves to bestial rage. "Walk with me," the king commanded, turning toward a side corridor. Vegeta followed without question, his tail now wrapped loosely around his waist in unconscious imitation of his father. They walked in silence through the palace's winding passages, passing elaborate murals that depicted Saiyan history. Battles won, planets conquered, glory eternal. The propaganda of a warrior race. But King Vegeta led them past these public displays to a section of the palace few knew existed. Behind a hidden door sealed with energy locks that responded only to royal blood, a narrow staircase descended into darkness. The king generated a small energy sphere in his palm, bathing the stone steps in pale light. "Where are we going?" Vegeta asked, his voice echoing in the confined space. "To show you something your grandfather showed me, and his father showed him." The king's voice was solemn. "A secret that has been kept by our bloodline since before we ever left planet Sadala. A secret that Frisia must never learn." The staircase seemed to descend forever, spiraling down into the bedrock beneath the palace. The air grew cooler, older, heavy with the weight of centuries. Finally, they emerged into a chamber that took Vegeta's breath away. The room was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows above. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, illuminated by strange crystals that pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent glow. But it was the central image that dominated everything. A massive relief carved directly into the far wall, easily 50 feet tall. It depicted a great ape, but unlike any oozaru Vegeta had seen in training recordings or heard about in stories, this one stood upright with dignified posture rather than the hunched, bestial stance of a normal transformed Saiyan. Its eyes were carved with intricate detail, showing intelligence rather than mindless rage. And most striking of all, radiating lines had been etched around its form, suggesting power, control, and majesty. "What is this?" Vegeta whispered, awed despite himself. "This is what we were before we forgot," King Vegeta said quietly. "Before we became soldiers for hire, before we allowed ourselves to be collared by tyrants like Frisia, our ancestors didn't fear the oozaru form, they mastered it. They understood that the great ape wasn't a curse or a weapon of last resort. It was the truest expression of Saiyan power." The king walked closer to the carving, his hand reaching out to trace the ancient lines. "When I was your age, my father brought me here. He told me that our bloodline carries a gift, the potential to achieve what these carvings show. Not just transformation, but true mastery. The ability to think, to strategize, to remain yourself while wielding the power of the great ape." Vegeta stared at the carving, his mind racing. "Is that even possible?" "I've achieved glimpses of it," his father admitted. "Moments of clarity within the transformation, seconds where I could think clearly instead of simply destroying everything around me. But I never had the time to develop it fully. The responsibilities of ruling, the demands Frisia places on us." He trailed off, his expression darkening. "Then teach me," Vegeta said immediately, his voice intense. "If you can't master it, I will. I'll surpass you. I'll surpass everyone." King Vegeta turned to look at his son, and for the first time in their conversation, he smiled, a rare, genuine expression that softened his usually stern features. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. But you need to understand something, Vegeta. This path is dangerous. If Frisia learns that you're developing this ability, he'll see you as a threat. He already watches our family closely. If he decides you're too dangerous, let him try, Vegeta said with all the fearless bravado of a 5-year-old who didn't yet fully understand mortality. I'll crush him like I crush all my enemies. The king's smile faded. You're brave, my son, but Frisia's power is beyond anything you've faced. Beyond anything any Saiyan has ever faced. Our entire race exists at his mercy. That's why this training must remain secret. No one can know, not Nappa, not Raditz, not even your most trusted warriors in the future. This knowledge dies with us if necessary, but if you can master it. His eyes glowed with dangerous hope. If you can truly master the oozaru, if you can tap into the power our ancestors wielded, then maybe, just maybe, you'll have a chance to free our people. Vegeta's tail lashed behind him, his excitement barely contained. When do we start? Right now. The training that began that day was unlike anything Vegeta had experienced before. King Vegeta wasn't teaching him new fighting techniques or more powerful energy attacks. Instead, he taught meditation, breathing exercises, and mental disciplines that seemed absurdly simple yet proved incredibly difficult. The oozaru transformation is triggered by blood's waves. The specific wavelength of light reflected by a full moon, the king explained during their first lesson, sitting cross-legged on the chamber floor with Vegeta mirroring his position. But the transformation is only the first step. What happens after that is usually pure instinct and rage. The power increases tenfold, but the mind becomes that of a beast. You attack everything, friend or foe, until you either exhaust yourself or someone removes your tail. But why? Vegeta asked, his tail curling around his waist in concentration. If the power is ours, why can't we control it? Because we forget, his father said simply. The moment the transformation takes hold, we forget who we are. We forget our training, our purpose, our identity. The beast consumes everything else. But our ancestors learned a secret. The human mind doesn't disappear during transformation. It's still there, buried beneath the primal instincts. And with enough discipline, enough practice, enough sheer force of will, you can hold on to yourself even as your body changes. He gestured to the carved image on the wall. That's what this represents. Not a different transformation, but a different state of mind during transformation. The sovereign ape, we called it in the old tongue. The great ape that remembers it's also a warrior, a prince, a person. Over the following weeks, their training fell into a pattern. During the day, Vegeta continued his normal education, combat training with elite warriors, lessons in strategy and tactics, the endless tedium of royal protocol and political maneuvering. He hated the politics most of all, the elaborate dances of courtesy and veiled threats that characterized interactions with Frisia's representatives. But at night, after the palace had settled into quiet and the servants had retreated to their quarters, father and son would descend into the secret chamber. There, King Vegeta taught his son the mental disciplines passed down through generations of royalty. Close your eyes, the king would instruct. Feel your tail. Not just as a physical appendage, but as a connection to your power. The tail isn't just a weak point, Vegeta. It's a conduit. Every Saiyan feels a surge of energy through their tail when they transform. Most are overwhelmed by it. You're going to learn to channel it, to control it, to make it yours. Vegeta would sit in meditation for hours, focusing on the sensation of his tail, the way it moved, the way energy seemed to flow through it differently than through the rest of his body. It was frustrating work. His natural inclination was toward action, toward physical training and combat. This quiet, internal practice felt like a waste of time. But gradually, over weeks and then months, something began to shift. Vegeta started to notice things he never paid attention to before. The way his tail would twitch right before someone entered a room, responding to their energy signature before his other senses detected them. The way wrapping his tail around his waist seemed to contain and concentrate his power, while letting it hang loose allowed energy to flow more freely. Good, his father said during one session, opening his eyes to observe his son. You're beginning to understand. The tail isn't just a part of your body, it's a sensory organ, an energy regulator, and during transformation, it becomes the key to maintaining your consciousness. The more aware you are of it now, in your base form, the easier it will be to hold on to that awareness when you transform. When will I actually get to transform? Vegeta asked, frustration creeping into his voice. I've been doing these exercises for 3 months. I want to test them, to see if they actually work. King Vegeta shook his head. You're not ready. If you transform now, without more preparation, you'll be just another mindless oozaru. Worse, you might accidentally reveal what we're working toward. Be patient. I'm a Saiyan prince. Vegeta's voice rose. Patience is for the weak. Patience is a weapon, his father corrected sharply. One you clearly haven't learned to wield yet. Do you think Frieza conquered half the universe through impatience? He waits, he watches, he strikes only when the moment is perfect. That's why he's the one giving orders instead of taking them. The comparison to Frieza stung worse than any physical blow could have. Vegeta's expression hardened, his jaw clenching, but he settled back into meditation without another word. His tail wrapped tighter around his waist, almost painfully so. King Vegeta watched his son struggle with his emotions and allowed himself a moment of guilt. The boy was only 5 years old. For all his power and pride, he should be playing, training in the normal way, enjoying what little childhood a Saiyan prince could claim. Instead, his father was placing the weight of an entire race's hopes on his small shoulders. But there was no choice. The king could feel the noose tightening around planet Vegeta. Frieza's visits had become more frequent, his questions more pointed. The tyrant was growing paranoid, seeing threats in every shadow, and the Saiyans, with their growing power and warrior pride, were obvious targets for that paranoia. King Vegeta had his spies in Frieza's organization. He knew the tyrant was considering eliminating the Saiyan race entirely. The only thing staying his hand was their usefulness as soldiers and the uncertainty about what would happen if he moved against them directly. But that calculation could change at any moment, so Vegeta, young, fierce, proud Vegeta, had to learn faster than any Saiyan in history. He had to master what took their ancestors generations to achieve, because if he didn't, there might not be any Saiyans left to pass the knowledge on to. Again, the king said quietly. From the beginning. Feel your tail, focus on your breathing, and clear your mind of everything else. Vegeta obeyed, settling into the meditation with grim determination. His tail slowly unwound from his waist, hanging loose behind him as he'd been taught. And in that sacred chamber, beneath layers of stone and secrets, the prince began the long journey toward becoming something planet Vegeta hadn't seen in centuries. 6 months after their training began, everything changed. It was a day like any other. Or it should have been. Vegeta woke early, as always, and went through his morning training routine. At 7 years old now, he had grown stronger, faster, more skilled. His tail had become so integrated into his fighting style that his sparring partners often forgot to protect themselves against it, leading to quick defeats. He was in the middle of breakfast, a massive meal of protein and nutrients required to fuel a Saiyan warrior's metabolism, when a servant rushed into the dining hall, bowing frantically. My prince, Lord Frieza's ship has been detected entering orbit. The entire command staff is to report to the landing platform immediately. Vegeta's appetite vanished. Frieza never announced his visits in advance, and his unscheduled arrivals always meant trouble. The young prince rose from his seat, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, his tail immediately wrapping around his waist in a gesture that had become instinctive. Where is my father? Already at the platform, my prince. He instructed me to bring you as soon as you were informed. Vegeta nodded curtly and strode toward the exit, his mind racing. In his evening lessons with his father, they had discussed the various political scenarios that might unfold with Frieza. None of them ended well for the Saiyans. The best they could hope for was maintaining the unstable status quo, continuing to serve as Frieza's attack dogs while quietly building their strength. The worst. Vegeta didn't want to think about the worst. The landing platform was a massive structure on the palace's roof, capable of accommodating the largest spacecraft. By the time Vegeta arrived, a crowd had already gathered, the Saiyan elite, commanders and generals and nobles, all standing in careful formation. At their head stood King Vegeta, resplendent in his royal armor, his face a mask of calm authority. Vegeta took his place at his father's right hand, standing straight despite his young age. He noticed how the other Saiyans glanced at him, their expressions a mixture of respect and pity. They all knew that being crown prince in these times was more curse than blessing. The sky above them was clear and red, the eternal color of planet Vegeta's atmosphere. But now a shadow fell across it as Frisia's ship descended, a massive vessel that seemed to blot out the sun, its white hull gleaming like bone. The ship landed with surprising gentleness for something so large, its engines creating whirlwinds that forced the assembled Saiyans to brace themselves. A ramp extended from the ship's main entrance, and down it came a procession that made every Saiyan warrior present tense with barely suppressed hatred. First came Zarbon, Frisia's right hand, his pretty face twisted into a condescending smirk. Then Dodoria, the pink monstrosity who had personally overseen the conquest of dozens of planets, and between them, hovering in his personal hoverpod, came Frisia himself. The tyrant was small, almost child-sized, but no one who valued their life made the mistake of dismissing him for his stature. His smooth, white skin seemed to catch the red light strangely, making him look both delicate and alien. His tail, longer and more articulated than any Saiyan's, swayed behind him with hypnotic rhythm, but it was his eyes that truly captured attention, cold, calculating, absolutely devoid of mercy. "Ah, King Vegeta." Frisia's voice was high and pleasant, like someone commenting on the weather. "How delightful to see you again. And this must be the young prince. My, hasn't he grown?" Those eyes fixed on Vegeta, and the young prince felt his blood run cold. It was like being examined by a predator, something that saw you not as a person but as potential prey. Vegeta forced himself to meet that gaze, to show no fear, even as every instinct screamed at him to look away. "Lord Frisia," King Vegeta said, bowing just deep enough to satisfy protocol but no deeper. "Your visit honors us. Had we known you were coming, we would have prepared a proper reception." "Oh, I prefer these spontaneous visits," Frisia said lightly, his hoverpod drifting closer. "They give me such a better sense of the current atmosphere." His emphasis on the word made it clear he was evaluating more than just morale. He stopped directly in front of Vegeta, looking down at the young prince with an expression that might have been curiosity or amusement. It was hard to tell with Frisia. "Tell me, young prince, how old are you now?" "7, Lord Frisia," Vegeta said, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. "7. A marvelous age. You know, I understand you've been training quite diligently. Your father has such high hopes for you." Frisia's smile widened. "I wonder, might we see a small demonstration? I do so enjoy watching the younger generation display their talents." It wasn't a request, and everyone present knew it. King Vegeta's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he nodded. "Of course, Lord Frisia. Vegeta, show our guest what you've learned." A space was cleared on the platform. One of the elite warriors, a grizzled veteran named Mortis, stepped forward to serve as Vegeta's opponent. The prince moved to the center of the makeshift arena, his tail unwrapping from his waist to hang loose behind him. He saw Frisia's eyes fix on that tail immediately, and noticed Zarbon and Dodoria exchanging knowing glances. The tail. It always came back to the tail. "Begin," King Vegeta commanded. Mortis came at Vegeta hard but fair, not holding back entirely but also not trying to seriously injure the prince. Vegeta met the attacks with skill that drew murmurs from the assembled Saiyans. He wasn't just fighting with his hands and feet. His tail was an integral part of every movement, blocking, redirecting, even attacking when opportunities presented themselves. After 2 minutes of intense combat, Vegeta saw an opening. He feinted low, drawing Mortis's guard down, then used his tail to wrap around his opponent's ankle. With a surge of strength impressive for his size, Vegeta yanked Mortis off balance, and followed up with an energy blast that sent the larger warrior sprawling. The match was over. Vegeta stood victorious, breathing hard but showing no sign of exhaustion he surely felt. His tail swayed behind him, almost casually. The assembled Saiyans erupted in restrained cheers, restrained because of Frisia's presence, but enthusiastic nonetheless. Their prince had performed admirably, but Frisia wasn't cheering. He was studying Vegeta with an intensity that made the young prince's skin crawl. "Fascinating," Frisia said softly. Then, louder, "Quite impressive, young prince. You have considerable talent." But I couldn't help but notice. His hoverpod drifted closer. "You've become quite proficient with your tail. Most Saiyan children your age have such poor control over theirs. It's really quite remarkable. The platform fell silent. Every Saiyan warrior present understood the danger in Frisia's words. Tell me, Frisia continued, his voice deceptively pleasant, has anyone ever suggested removing it? You know, as a safety precaution? We wouldn't want any accidents during missions. A sudden transformation at an inopportune moment could be so problematic. King Vegeta stepped forward. The royal family maintains its tails as a matter of tradition, Lord Frisia. A symbol of our heritage and authority over the Saiyan people. Tradition. Frisia drew the word out, tasting it. Yes, I suppose I understand the appeal of tradition. Still, it does represent a certain liability, doesn't it? Especially during missions on planets with suitable moons. The oozaru form is so terribly indiscriminate in its violence. My son has been trained to be aware of his surroundings, the king said carefully. He knows to avoid planetary missions during full moons, or to take appropriate precautions. Frisia's tail swished behind him. I wonder if I might propose a small test? Nothing dangerous, I assure you. Simply a demonstration of the prince's control under slightly more challenging circumstances. Before anyone could respond, Frisia gestured to Zarbon. The elegant warrior smirked and raised one hand, generating a sphere of energy that began to pulse with a specific frequency. The light it gave off was strange, slightly bluish, and it made every Saiyan on the platform suddenly tense. Blood's waves. The energy that triggered the oozaru transformation. Lord Frisia, King Vegeta said, his voice hardening, this is not. Oh, it's just a small amount, Frisia said dismissively. Barely enough to trigger a transformation, really. But I'm curious to see how well our young prince handles even a partial shift. If he's as controlled as you claim, there shouldn't be any problem at all. Unless... His eyes glinted dangerously. Unless there's something you've been neglecting to tell me about your son's training? The trap was beautifully laid. If they refused, it would suggest they were hiding something. If they agreed and Vegeta lost control, it would prove that the tail was indeed a liability. One Frisia would insist on correcting. And if Vegeta somehow maintained control despite his young age and limited training, that might be even worse. It would mean the young prince had been receiving specialized training, possibly aimed at mastering the oozaru form, and Frisia would see that as exactly the kind of threat he had been watching for. Vegeta felt his father's hand briefly touch his shoulder, a gesture invisible to Frisia but unmistakable to the prince. It was a silent message: trust your training. Remember what I taught you. I accept your test, Lord Frisia, Vegeta heard himself say, his voice clear and proud. I am the prince of all Saiyans. I will not shame my lineage. Frisia's smile was like a knife. Excellent. I do so admire bravery in the young. Zarbon, if you please. The sphere of Blood's wave energy intensified. Vegeta felt it immediately, a tingling in his tail that quickly spread through his entire body. His heart rate spiked. His muscles began to tense. The world around him started to take on a reddish tinge, and he felt a primal fury building in his chest, demanding release. No. Not like this. Not for Frisia's entertainment. Vegeta closed his eyes and reached for the lessons from the secret chamber. Feel your tail. Focus on your breathing. Clear your mind. You are not the beast. You are Prince Vegeta, heir to the throne, and you will not be controlled by your own power. The transformation began. Vegeta felt his body starting to expand, his clothes straining, fangs beginning to push past his lips. But then, with an effort that made his entire body shake, he stopped it. Not fully. That would have been impossible with Blood's waves coursing through him. But he held it at the threshold, keeping himself in that space between forms, where his body wanted desperately to change, but his will refused to allow it. Sweat poured down his face. His tail had gone completely rigid, standing straight out behind him. Every muscle in his body was locked in a struggle against his own biology. But his eyes opened, and they were still Vegeta's eyes, fierce, aware, and absolutely refusing to yield. He stood like that for 30 seconds that felt like an eternity. Around him, the assembled Saiyans watched in amazed silence. Even Zarbon looked impressed, and Frisia. Frisia's smile had faded. He was studying Vegeta with an expression that sent ice through King Vegeta's heart. It was the look Frieza got right before he destroyed something. Enough, Frieza said quietly, and Zarbon immediately cancelled the Bloodwave sphere. The relief was instant and overwhelming. Vegeta's body stopped straining against transformation, and he nearly collapsed from the sudden release of tension. But he forced himself to remain standing, to keep his expression proud and controlled even though he wanted nothing more than to fall to his knees and gasp for air. Well, Frieza said after a long, dangerous pause. That was quite remarkable indeed. To resist transformation at such a young age, you truly are something special, Prince Vegeta. There was no warmth in the compliment. It was an assessment, a categorization of threat level. Frieza turned his hoverpod toward King Vegeta. Your son is exceptionally talented. I can see why you've kept such close supervision over his training. One might almost think you were preparing him for something significant. I'm preparing him to serve the interests of your empire, Lord Frieza, King Vegeta said carefully. As do all loyal Saiyans. Of course, of course. Frieza's tail swished again. Well, I think I've seen enough for today. But before I go, I really must insist on one small thing. For safety purposes, you understand. He gestured, and two of his soldiers, alien warriors in standard armor, stepped forward carrying specialized tools. Medical equipment, Vegeta realized with growing horror. Remove the boy's tail, Frieza commanded. Right here, right now. Just a simple procedure. It won't even hurt much, and it will eliminate any concerns about future incidents. The world seemed to stop. Every Saiyan on that platform felt their blood run cold. It was one thing for warriors to lose their tails in battle, painful but sometimes necessary. But to deliberately mutilate a child, the Crown Prince no less, as a demonstration of power. Lord Frieza, King Vegeta began, his voice dangerously low. Is there a problem? Frieza's tone was light, but his eyes were deadly. Surely this is a reasonable precaution. Unless, of course, you have some objection? Some reason why the tail is so important to keep, the trap snapped shut. If they objected too strenuously, it would confirm Frieza's suspicions that something special was happening with Vegeta's tail training. But if they didn't object at all, Vegeta's mind raced. His tail. The months of training, the secret chamber, the ancient techniques, all of it would be destroyed in a single cut. He would never master the oozaru form. He would never become the warrior his father hoped for, the one who might someday free their people. But more than that, on an instinctive level that went beyond logic or strategy, the thought of losing his tail filled Vegeta with rage. It was part of him, an extension of his power and pride. To surrender it because some tyrant demanded it. No, I refuse, Vegeta said, his voice ringing clear across the platform. Every head turned toward him. His father's eyes widened in alarm. Frieza's eyebrows rose in surprise. I'm sorry? Frieza said, as if he hadn't heard correctly. Did you just refuse? I am Prince Vegeta, heir to the throne of planet Vegeta, warrior of the Saiyan race, Vegeta said, his young voice carrying a weight far beyond his years. My tail is part of my heritage, a symbol of my bloodline and my strength. I will not surrender it to ease your paranoia. The silence that followed was absolute. No one spoke to Frieza like that. No one refused his commands. Those who tried ended up as dust scattered across the cosmos. But in that moment, something shifted. King Vegeta saw it in his son's eyes, not just defiance, but pride so fierce it bordered on madness. And he realized that this was the moment he'd been preparing Vegeta for, even if he hadn't known it. The moment where the prince would have to choose between submission and sovereignty. King Vegeta stepped forward, placing himself between Frieza and his son. My son speaks with the passion of youth, but his point is valid. The removal of a royal tail is not merely a medical procedure, it's a symbolic castration of our leadership. If you force this, Lord Frieza, you'll damage the very hierarchy you rely upon to keep the Saiyan warriors obedient and effective. Frieza's expression had gone cold and hard. Are you threatening me, King Vegeta? I'm explaining the political realities, the king replied, his voice steady despite the danger. You rule through fear, but also through the chains of command. If you humiliate my son publicly, you weaken my authority. And if my authority is weakened, the Saiyan warriors become harder to control, more unpredictable. Is that what you want? The tyrant considered this, his tail twitching with irritation. Finally, he smiled, a terrible expression that held no humor whatsoever. You make an interesting argument, King Vegeta. Very well. The boy can keep his tail, for now. Consider it a gesture of my generosity. His eyes fixed on Vegeta. But understand this, young prince. I'll be watching you very closely from now on. If that tail ever becomes a problem, if you ever lose control during a mission, if you ever give me the slightest reason to reconsider this decision. He let the threat hang in the air, unfinished but perfectly clear. I won't, Vegeta said, meeting those deadly eyes without flinching. I am a prince. I am always in control. Frieza laughed, a light, tinkling sound that sent shivers down spines. Oh, I hope you're right, boy. For your sake, and for your father's, I truly do hope you're right. With that, Frieza's hoverpod turned and drifted back toward his ship. Zarbon and Dodoria followed, the pink warrior throwing a last venomous look at the assembled Saiyans. Within minutes, the ship was powering up, its engines creating hurricane-force winds as it lifted off. The Saiyans remained silent until the ship had disappeared into the red sky, becoming just another bright point of light among the stars. Only then did the tension break, and a collective sigh of relief seemed to flow through the entire gathering. King Vegeta turned to his son. For a moment, Vegeta feared he would be angry. The prince had, after all, nearly provoked a confrontation that could have ended with all of them dead. But instead, his father placed both hands on his shoulders and looked at him with something like awe. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen, the king said quietly. Possibly both. I couldn't let him take it, Vegeta said, his voice finally cracking with the emotion he'd been suppressing. All our training, everything you've taught me, it would have been for nothing. I know. King Vegeta pulled his son close in a brief, fierce embrace, a rare gesture from a man who had been taught that affection was weakness. You did well. But you also made yourself a target. Frieza won't forget this. He'll be watching, waiting for you to fail, hoping for an excuse to finish what he started today. Then I won't fail, Vegeta said simply, looking at his son's fierce eyes, his stubborn pride, his unshakable confidence. King Vegeta felt a weight settle over his heart. He had succeeded in one sense. Vegeta had the fire needed to one day challenge their oppression. But he had also created something dangerous, something that would not yield or compromise, even in the face of overwhelming power. Time would tell if that was a blessing or a curse. That night, in the secret chamber beneath the palace, father and son sat in meditation before the ancient carving of the sovereign ape. Neither spoke for a long time, processing the events of the day. Finally, King Vegeta broke the silence. You understand what happened today changed everything? Frieza wants to kill me, Vegeta said flatly. He wanted to before, but now he has a personal reason. Yes. Which means our timeline has accelerated. We don't have years for you to master the oozaru form anymore. We might have months, maybe less, before Frieza decides to eliminate the Saiyan race entirely. The king's voice was heavy. I had hoped to spare you this burden until you were older, stronger. But events have forced our hand. He stood and walked to a section of the chamber wall that appeared blank. Pressing his hand against the stone in a specific pattern, he revealed a hidden compartment. From it, he withdrew a small sphere that glowed with gentle blue light. Do you know what this is? He asked his son. Vegeta shook his head. It's a power ball, a concentrated sphere of Blood's waves. Thrown into the air and activated, it creates an artificial moon, triggering transformation in any Saiyan who looks at it. King Vegeta held the sphere carefully. I created this years ago, intending to use it if I ever needed to transform indoors or on a moonless planet. But I think it's time for your first real transformation. Vegeta's tail twitched with excitement. Now, not yet. First, I need you to promise me something. The king knelt down, bringing himself to his son's eye level. What you're about to experience will be overwhelming. The power, the rage, the loss of self, it will feel like drowning in pure instinct. You will want to destroy everything around you. And for your first transformation, you probably will lose yourself completely. That's normal. That's expected. Then why? Because you need to know what you're fighting against, his father interrupted. You need to understand the enemy within before you can defeat it. Tonight you'll transform, and you'll lose control. But I'll be here to make sure you don't hurt yourself or damage anything critical. And tomorrow, we begin the real training, teaching you to hold on to yourself in the face of that overwhelming power." He placed a hand on Vegeta's shoulder. "This is the legacy I'm passing to you, my son. Not just the throne, not just the title of prince, but the secret knowledge that might one day free our people. But it comes with a price. Once you walk this path, there's no going back. Frieza will always see you as a threat, and you'll always have to prove you're more than just a beast with a tail." "I'm ready," Vegeta said without hesitation. King Vegeta searched his son's face, seeing determination but also youth, innocence that would soon be lost. He thought about calling it off, about finding another way, about protecting his child just a little longer. But the memory of Frieza's cold eyes, the knowledge of the tyrant's paranoia, the weight of their entire race's future, all of it pressed down on him, leaving no room for sentiment. "Very well," he said, standing and moving to the center of the chamber. "Stand back. Once I throw the power ball, don't look away from it, no matter what. Let the transformation take you. And remember, no matter what happens, no matter how lost you become in the beast's mind, I will bring you back." Vegeta moved to the edge of the chamber, his heart pounding. This was it. Everything he'd been training for, the reason for months of meditation and discipline. King Vegeta raised the sphere above his head. "Burst open and mix." He threw the power ball upward, and it erupted into brilliant light, a miniature moon hanging in the chamber's darkness. Blood's waves flooded the space, washing over both father and son, but only Vegeta was close enough, young enough, unprepared enough to be overwhelmed by it. The transformation hit him like a tidal wave. His body exploded in size, muscles expanding, bones lengthening, fur erupting across every inch of skin. His clothes shredded. His vision went red, his mouth filled with massive fangs. And his mind, his careful, trained, disciplined mind, was swept away by a roar of pure, animalistic fury. The great ape Vegeta threw back his massive head and screamed, a sound of rage and power that shook the very foundations of the palace. King Vegeta watched his son transform with eyes full of sorrow and pride. The beast that had been his son swung massive fists at the chamber walls, scoring deep gouges in the ancient stone. It roared again and again, lost completely to instinct. "I'm sorry, my son," the king whispered. "But this is the price of power. And you will master it, because you must. The fate of every Saiyan depends on it." Above them, in the red-lit palace, in the cities beyond, across the entire planet, Saiyans went about their lives, unaware that in a secret chamber deep beneath the royal throne, the future of their race was taking its first steps toward either salvation or destruction. The great ape roared again, and King Vegeta prepared to spend the long night bringing his son back from the edge of madness. The true training was about to begin. 4 years later, the transport pod hurtled through the void of space, its cramped interior barely large enough for the 3 Saiyan warriors crammed inside. Prince Vegeta, now 11 years old, sat with his arms crossed and his eyes closed, appearing to meditate. His tail was wrapped firmly around his waist, a habit that had become second nature over the years of training. Across from him, Nappa, the towering, bald-headed general who served as commander of the Saiyan elite forces, was reviewing mission parameters on a holographic display. His own tail, thick and powerful, hung loosely behind him, occasionally twitching with anticipation for the coming battle. In the third seat, Raditz lounged with the casual arrogance of someone who had survived countless planetary conquests. His wild mane of hair seemed to defy the pod's artificial gravity, and his tail swished back and forth in a steady rhythm that betrayed his excitement despite his relaxed posture. "Target planet Shik," Nappa said, his deep voice filling the small space. "Population approximately 2 million. Technology level, primitive. Estimated resistance, minimal. Lord Frieza wants it cleared within 3 days for the new trading post installation." 3 days? Raditz scoffed. "We could clear it in 3 hours if we actually tried." "The prince is with us," Nappa reminded him, his tone carrying a warning edge. "We follow proper protocol. Lord Frieza wants this to serve as part of his training evaluation." At the mention of Frieza, Vegeta's eyes opened. In the 4 years since that confrontation on the palace landing platform, The tension between the Saiyan royal family and the galactic tyrant had only intensified. Frieza had kept his word about allowing Vegeta to keep his tail, but the cost had been constant surveillance, and increasingly dangerous missions designed to test the young prince's limits, or to create an excuse for his elimination. Protocol, Vegeta said, his voice dripping with contempt. You mean Frieza's little tests? He wants to see if I'll lose control, if my tail will become the liability he predicted. Nappa's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held a warning. The transport pods were monitored. Everything they said could and would be reported back to Frieza's command. Even here, millions of miles from any planet, they weren't truly alone. We follow orders, Nappa said carefully. As we always have. Vegeta's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. He had learned some measure of political caution in the past 4 years, though it chafed against his nature like ill-fitting armor. Instead, he closed his eyes again and returned his attention inward, to the constant, vigilant awareness of his tail and the power it represented. The transformation in the secret chamber 4 years ago had been educational. That was the kindest word for it. In truth, it had been a nightmare. Vegeta could still remember fragments of that first transformation, not clearly, not as coherent memories, but as flashes of sensation and emotion. The overwhelming surge of power that had felt like his body would tear apart from the inside. The rage that consumed everything else, reducing his thoughts to pure, primal fury. The complete loss of self, as if Prince Vegeta had simply ceased to exist, replaced by a creature of destruction that knew only hunger and violence. His father had contained him in that underground chamber, using energy barriers and precise strikes to keep the rampaging oozaru from causing too much damage. When the power ball's effect had finally worn off and Vegeta had returned to his normal form, he had been covered in bruises, exhausted beyond anything he'd experienced before, and utterly humiliated. I couldn't control any of it, he had gasped, lying on the stone floor while his father tended to his wounds. It was like I wasn't even there. You weren't, King Vegeta had said gently. The beast was in complete control. But you felt it, didn't you? The power? Oh, he had felt it. Even through the haze of bestial rage, even lost in the mindless fury, there had been an intoxicating sense of strength. 10 times his normal power, maybe more. If he could access even a fraction of that while maintaining his sanity. But the gulf between transformed and controlled seemed impossibly vast. The training that followed had been grueling beyond anything Vegeta had imagined. Night after night, he and his father would descend into the secret chamber. They had moved the sessions to the deep underground specifically because of what they required. Repeated transformations, each one a battle against the beast within. King Vegeta had acquired a supply of power balls, allowing Vegeta to transform at will rather than waiting for the full moon. At first, the transformations had been exactly like the first one. Complete loss of control, pure destruction, his father forced to contain and eventually knock him unconscious to end the rampage. But slowly, painfully slowly, things began to change. The first breakthrough came 3 months after that initial transformation. Vegeta transformed as usual, the great ape roaring and thrashing, attacking everything in sight. But for just a moment, no more than 5 seconds, something pierced through the red haze of fury. A thought, clear and crystalline, I am Prince Vegeta. Then the beast consumed him again, and the moment was lost. But it had existed. And that made all the difference. Did you feel that? His father had asked eagerly after that session, once Vegeta had reverted and caught his breath. For a second, I remembered who I was. Vegeta's hands were shaking, though whether from exhaustion or excitement, he couldn't tell. Just my name. Nothing else. But it was there. That's the seed, King Vegeta had said, gripping his son's shoulder. That moment of clarity is what we build on. Every transformation, you try to hold on to that awareness just a little longer. Eventually, those seconds become minutes. The minutes become the entire transformation. And then, he had gestured to the ancient carving on the wall, the sovereign ape, standing proud and aware. From that night forward, Vegeta's training had taken on new intensity. His father taught him to anchor his consciousness to specific things, his name, his royal status, his pride. These became mantras he would repeat during meditation, burning them so deeply into his psyche that even the beast couldn't erase them completely. I am Prince Vegeta. I am heir to the Saiyan throne. I am not a mindless beast. Over and over, day and night, until the words became more than just sounds. They became fundamental truths that existed beyond conscious thought. The next breakthrough took another 6 months. This time, when he transformed, Vegeta managed to recognize his father. Not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a person, someone important, someone who mattered. The recognition lasted nearly a minute before dissolving back into rage, but it was progress. After that, each transformation brought small victories. A moment where he controlled his movements instead of just thrashing wildly. A second where he deliberately held back a strike that would have seriously injured his father. A flash of tactical awareness, seeing the chamber not as a confusing blur but as an actual space with dimensions and features. By his 9th birthday, Vegeta could maintain partial awareness for nearly 5 minutes of each transformation. It wasn't true control. He was still mostly beast during those periods. But the human mind was beginning to assert itself against the primal instincts. And then came the first mission where the moon was full. The memory still made Vegeta's tail twitch with a mixture of pride and shame. He had been 9 years old, assigned to accompany Nappa and Raditz on what should have been a routine planetary conquest. The target world had been inhabited by a species of reptilian warriors who fought with primitive but effective weapons. The mission briefing had specifically noted that the planet had a single large moon. Avoid looking at it after dark, Nappa had instructed before they landed. We don't need any complications from uncontrolled transformations. But Vegeta had seen an opportunity. 2 years of secret training, countless transformations in the controlled environment of the underground chamber. He wanted to test himself in the field. He wanted to prove that his tail wasn't a liability but an asset. So that night, when the moon rose full and bright over the alien landscape, Vegeta had looked up deliberately. The transformation hit him with its usual overwhelming force. One moment he was a young Saiyan prince, the next he was a 50-foot-tall great ape, roaring his fury at the stars. The enemy forces that had been mounting a coordinated defense suddenly found themselves facing a monster from their worst nightmares. And for the first few minutes, it had worked. Vegeta had maintained enough control to recognize enemies from allies, to direct his attacks rather than just destroying everything in reach. He had felt his father's training paying off, the mental disciplines holding against the beast's fury. He crushed enemy fortifications, scattered their armies, reduced their capital city to rubble. All while Nappa and Raditz watched in stunned amazement. The young prince was actually controlling the oozaru form, at least partially. But then something went wrong. An enemy weapon, some kind of sonic cannon designed to disorient large creatures, had struck Vegeta square in the chest. The pain was immense, and pain was the beast's language. The fragile control he'd been maintaining shattered like glass. Suddenly, Vegeta wasn't directing his attacks anymore. He was just destroying everything. Friend, foe, landscape, it all became targets for his rage. He turned toward where Nappa and Raditz were fighting, saw movement, and attacked them as readily as he'd attacked the enemy. Nappa had barely managed to get them both airborne before Vegeta's massive fist obliterated the ground where they'd been standing, and then the great ape Vegeta, no longer recognizing his own comrades, had started trying to bring them down. It was Raditz who had saved them, using a precision energy blast to sever the power ball's effect and force Vegeta back to normal form. The prince had reverted mid-attack, suddenly finding himself 50 feet in the air with no memory of how he'd gotten there. The fall had broken his left arm and 3 ribs. When he'd regained consciousness in the medical bay of their ship, Nappa had been standing over him with an expression Vegeta had never seen before on the grizzled warrior's face. Disappointment mixed with genuine fear. "You almost killed us," Nappa had said bluntly. "Another few seconds and you would have. Is that what your special training has accomplished? Making you dangerous to your own forces?" The shame of that moment still burned in Vegeta's chest. He had been so confident, so certain that his training made him ready. But the reality was that he'd been nowhere near prepared. Control in the safety of the underground chamber was one thing. Control in the chaos of actual battle, with pain and adrenaline and genuine threats, was something else entirely. The report had gone to Frisia, of course. Everything always went to Frisia. And the tyrant's response had been interesting. Rather than use it as an excuse to finally remove Vegeta's tail, Shueisha had simply increased the difficulty and danger of the prince's assigned missions. It was as if he was waiting, watching, hoping for Vegeta to fail more spectacularly. Hoping for the perfect excuse to eliminate the troublesome Saiyan royal family once and for all. King Vegeta's response had been different. That night, in the secret chamber, he had looked at his son with eyes that held both sorrow and determination. "You learned an important lesson today," his father had said. "Control isn't binary. It's not something you either have or don't have. It exists on a spectrum, and your position on that spectrum can shift dramatically based on circumstances. Pain, fear, rage, these things can shatter control you thought was solid. Then how do I make it permanent?" Vegeta had demanded, frustrated with himself and his limitations. "How do I achieve true mastery?" "The same way you achieve mastery of anything: practice, experience, and time. But there's something else you need to understand, my son." King Vegeta had placed a hand on Vegeta's shoulder. "You're trying to do in years what took our ancestors generations. The ancient Saiyans who achieved the sovereign eighth form didn't do it as children. They were warriors in their prime, with decades of experience and wisdom. You're 11 years old. What you've accomplished so far is already extraordinary, but it's not enough." Vegeta's tail had lashed behind him in frustration. "Shueisha is waiting for me to fail. Every mission, every full moon, every moment I keep this tail, he's watching, hoping I'll give him a reason to." "Then you keep training," his father interrupted firmly. "You keep pushing, keep learning from your failures, keep building your control piece by piece. And you accept that this is a marathon, not a sprint. True mastery will come, but not today, not tomorrow. Maybe not for years." "I don't have years," Vegeta had said quietly. "You said it yourself. Shueisha could move against us at any time." King Vegeta had no answer for that, because it was true. They were racing against an invisible clock, trying to achieve the impossible before time ran out. "Prince Vegeta." Nappa's voice pulled him from his memories. Vegeta opened his eyes to find both warriors looking at him expectantly. "We're approaching planet Shik," Nappa continued. "ETA 20 minutes. Are you prepared?" "I'm always prepared," Vegeta said, unwrapping his tail from his waist and letting it hang loose. The sensation was freeing after hours of having it bound. "What are the moon conditions?" "No moon," Raditz answered, checking the planetary data. "The planet has a ring system instead. No risk of uncontrolled transformation." Vegeta nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and disappointment. Part of him wanted another chance to test his control under real combat conditions, but the memory of nearly killing his own teammates was still fresh enough to make him cautious. "Good," Nappa said, though Vegeta caught the way his eyes lingered on the prince's tail. "Then this should be straightforward. Remember, Lord Shueisha wants documentation of the entire conquest. Sabin will be reviewing our performance personally." Of course he would. Everything was a test now. Every mission, every battle, every moment was evaluated for signs that the Saiyan prince with the forbidden tail was too dangerous to be allowed to live. The pod began its descent, atmospheric friction making the whole glow red-hot. Through the viewport, Vegeta could see planet Shik spreading out below them. A world of green forests and blue oceans, peaceful and ignorant of the destruction about to rain down upon it. He felt nothing for the planet's inhabitants. There were obstacles to be cleared, resources to be harvested for Shueisha's empire. That was the reality of being a Saiyan warrior in this age. You followed orders, you conquered worlds, and you didn't ask questions about the morality of it all. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, Vegeta wondered if this was truly the destiny his ancestors had envisioned. The proud Saiyan race reduced to attack dogs for an alien tyrant, feared for their power but denied any real autonomy or purpose beyond violence. The pod landed with a violent impact that would have killed most beings, but barely registered to the 3 Saiyans inside. The hatch opened, and they emerged into the alien atmosphere of planet Shik. The air was thicker than Earth standard, with a faint copper tang. The sky was a pale yellow-green, and 2 suns hung at different angles, creating complex shadow patterns across the landscape. In the distance, Vegeta could see what appeared to be a city, crystalline structures that caught and refracted the double sunlight into prismatic displays. "Beautiful," Raditz commented, then his expression hardened. "Shame it has to be destroyed." "Contact in 30 seconds, Nappa reported, his scouter beeping as it detected approaching power levels. Multiple targets, power levels ranging from 800 to 1500. Primitive, but they know we're here. Indeed, Vegeta could see them now, the inhabitants of planet Shik. They were vaguely insected, with 4 arms and chitinous armor that gleamed in the double sunlight. They carried weapons that appeared to be a mix of energy-based technology and bladed implements. The first wave attacked without warning or negotiation. Energy blasts and projectiles filled the air, none of them strong enough to seriously threaten the Saiyans but numerous enough to be annoying. Engage, Nappa commanded, though it was hardly necessary. Vegeta moved first, his young body a blur of motion as he dodged incoming fire and closed the distance to the nearest enemy. His tail swished behind him, perfectly balanced with his movements, occasionally lashing out to strike or trip opponents who got too close. The battle was almost insultingly easy. The inhabitants of Shik fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Vegeta tore through their ranks like a blade through paper, each strike precise and efficient. He didn't waste energy on theatrics or excessive force, just clean, professional violence that accomplished the mission objective. Within an hour, the first city had fallen. The survivors fled toward the interior of the continent, no doubt hoping to regroup and mount some kind of defense. It wouldn't matter. The Saiyans would hunt them down methodically, eliminating all resistance until the planet was suitable for Frisia's purposes. Efficient work, Prince, Nappa said as they regrouped among the ruins of the Crystal City. Your combat skills continue to improve. Vegeta didn't respond to the compliment. He was staring at his hands, noting the blue blood of the insected aliens that coated his gloves. How many had he killed today? Hundreds? 1,000? The numbers had stopped meaning anything years ago. Movement to the north, Raditz reported. Looks like a larger settlement. Power levels slightly higher, some individuals reading around 2,000. Then that's where we go next, Nappa decided. Prince Vegeta, you take point. Consider this a leadership exercise, another test. Everything was always a test. Vegeta took to the air without comment, his white aura flaring around him as he flew toward the northern settlement. Behind him, Nappa and Raditz followed at a respectful distance, observing but not interfering unless absolutely necessary. The landscape blurred beneath him as he flew. Forests, rivers, mountains, all of it soon to be cleared to make way for whatever Frisia wanted to build here. A trading post, Nappa had said, a way station for ships traveling this sector. The entire population of a planet eliminated to create a parking lot for the Galactic Empire. Is this what strength means? The thought surprised Vegeta with its sudden appearance. Is this what I'm training so hard to preserve? The right to destroy worlds at a tyrant's command? He shook his head, annoyed at his own wayward thoughts. Sentiment was weakness. His father had taught him that. The strong ruled, the weak served or died. That was the fundamental truth of the universe. The Saiyans were strong, so they conquered. The inhabitants of this planet were weak, so they would be eliminated. Simple. Clean. No room for doubt or hesitation. The northern settlement came into view, larger than the first city, more heavily fortified. Vegeta could see defensive positions being manned, energy weapons being charged, warriors gathering for a last desperate stand. They must have received word about what happened to the first city. They knew what was coming. And still they prepared to fight, knowing they couldn't win, knowing they were all going to die. Foolish, Vegeta thought. They should surrender, offer their service to Lord Frisia. At least then some of them might survive. But even as the thought formed, he knew they wouldn't. He could see it in the way they held their weapons, in the defensive formations they'd arranged. These weren't warriors fighting because they thought they could win. They were fighting because it was all they had left. Fighting because surrender meant giving up everything they were, everything their species had ever been. Fighting because of pride. The realization hit Vegeta like a physical blow. He understood these people. Not in terms of their culture or their language or their specific circumstances, but in the fundamental sense of what drove them. They would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. Just like father, he realized. Just like every Saiyan who serves Frisia while secretly dreaming of the day we might be free. Prince Vegeta? Nappa's voice crackled through the scouter. Are you engaging? The targets are all assembled. Perfect opportunity for area effect attacks. Area effect attacks. Efficient language for mass slaughter. Vegeta hovered in the air above the settlement, his tail swishing behind him, and for a moment, just a moment, he hesitated. Then he remembered Frieza's cold eyes. Remembered the constant surveillance, the waiting for him to fail, the knowledge that any sign of weakness or disobedience would be used as an excuse to eliminate not just him, but his entire race. He remembered his father's words. We do what we must to survive until we're strong enough to do what we want. Engaging now, Vegeta said into his scouter, his voice flat and emotionless. He raised both hands, energy gathering in his palms. The insectoid warriors below saw the glow and knew what was coming. Some fled. Some raised their weapons in futile defiance. Some simply stood and accepted their fate. Vegeta unleashed the attack. The explosion was massive, visible from orbit. When the dust cleared, the settlement was gone. Nothing remained but a crater and the faint traces of energy signatures flickering out one by one. 2 million lives on this planet, Nappa had said. By Vegeta's calculation, they'd eliminated roughly 250,000 so far. Only 750,000 to go. He landed near the crater's edge, Nappa and Raditz joining him shortly after. Excellent work, Nappa said, his scouter scanning for remaining signatures. Clean, efficient, no wasted energy. Lord Frieza will be pleased with your performance. Lord Frieza will never be pleased, Vegeta thought bitterly. He'll never be satisfied until I'm dead and my tail is mounted on his wall as a trophy. There's still significant population in the southern hemisphere, Raditz reported. Should we continue the systematic elimination, or would you prefer a more dramatic approach? He was suggesting that Vegeta transform. Even without a moon, a Saiyan with sufficient skill could create an artificial power ball to trigger the oozaru form. It would make the conquest faster, certainly. One great ape could level continents in hours, but it would also mean transforming under battle conditions again, risking another loss of control. Giving Frieza more ammunition for his eventual case that Vegeta's tail made him too dangerous. No transformation, Vegeta said firmly. We do this the conventional way. Continue systematic elimination, sector by sector. As you command, Prince, Nappa said, though Vegeta thought he detected a note of relief in the veteran's voice. They spent the next 2 days completing the mission. 2 days of flying from settlement to settlement, eliminating resistance, watching an entire civilization crumble beneath Saiyan power. It was boring work, really, the kind of routine violence that had long since lost any sense of challenge or excitement. On the 3rd day, as they stood in the ruins of the planet's capital city, Nappa made his final report to Frieza's command. Planet Shik successfully cleared, he stated into his scouter's communication system. All major population centers eliminated. Remaining inhabitants scattered and pose no threat. Planet ready for Phase 2 development. Acknowledged, came Zarbon's silky voice through the communicator. Lord Frieza has reviewed your progress recordings. He notes that Prince Vegeta performed adequately, though he also notes that the prince declined to utilize his oozaru form despite it potentially expediting mission completion. Vegeta's hands clenched into fists. Even success was somehow used as evidence of his inadequacy. The prince judged conventional methods to be sufficient, Nappa responded carefully. And his judgment proved correct. Mission completed within the specified time frame. Indeed. There was something in Zarbon's tone that Vegeta didn't like. Well, Lord Frieza has decided that Prince Vegeta's next assignment should be more challenging. One that will truly test whether that tail of his is an asset or a liability. What assignment? Nappa asked, his voice tense. You'll receive the briefing upon return to base. But I can tell you this much, it involves a planet with 3 moons. All of them frequently full. Should be quite the test of the prince's vaunted self-control. The communication cut off, leaving the 3 Saiyans standing in silence among the ruins. 3 moons, Raditz said quietly. That's a death sentence, Vegeta finished, his voice cold. Frieza's finally stopped being subtle about his intentions. Nappa looked at the young prince, his expression conflicted. He was a loyal warrior, dedicated to following orders and maintaining the chain of command. But he was also Saiyan, and watching a boy, a prince, being systematically set up for failure went against something deep in his warrior's soul. We could report your tail as injured during this mission, Nappa said slowly. Recommend temporary removal for healing purposes. It would buy time, at least. No. Vegeta's voice was absolute. My tail stays. Whatever Frieza throws at me, I'll handle it. I'm not giving him the satisfaction of seeing me yield. Prince, be reasonable, I said no. Vegeta's aura flared around him, his power spiking with emotion. Every day I keep this tail, every mission I survive with it intact, is a victory against Frieza's expectations. The moment I voluntarily remove it, I admit he was right. I admit that Saiyans are nothing but beasts who need to be controlled and restrained. I won't do that. I can't. His tail lashed behind him, emphasizing his words. Besides, I've been training. My control is better than it was. I can handle 3 moons. Can you? A small voice in his head asked. You couldn't handle 1 moon 2 years ago. You nearly killed your own comrades. What makes you think 3 will be any different? But Vegeta pushed the doubt aside. Doubt was weakness, and weakness was death. He would master the oozaru form because the alternative was surrendering everything he was. We returned to base, he commanded. I want to review the briefing for this new mission immediately. And when we arrive, I have training to do. Training. Always training. Night after night in the secret chamber, transforming and fighting to hold on to his consciousness. Hours of meditation, focusing on his tail, on the connection between his Saiyan biology and his warrior's discipline. Days of studying the ancient texts his father had preserved, searching for any additional insight into how the ancestors had achieved the sovereign ape form. And all of it might not be enough. The journey back to Frieza's base took 3 days. 3 days during which Vegeta barely slept, instead spending his time in meditation, feeling his tail, monitoring the flow of energy through his body. He knew this was it, the real test. Frieza had arranged circumstances designed to force Vegeta either to lose control and prove he was too dangerous, or to voluntarily remove his tail and admit defeat. There had to be a third option. There always was. His father had taught him that the mark of true royalty wasn't just strength but cunning, finding solutions where others saw only impossible choices. When they finally docked at the orbital station that served as Frieza Force's regional headquarters, Vegeta went immediately to review the mission briefing. What he found made his blood run cold. The target planet was called Tigris IV. It orbited a binary star system and had 3 natural satellites, moons that followed independent orbital paths. According to the astronomical data, all 3 moons would be full simultaneously in exactly 7 days, an alignment that occurred only once every several years. The mission objective was straightforward: eliminate a rebel faction that had established a base on Tigris IV. The rebels were well armed and had proven troublesome to Frieza's operations in the sector. Normally, this would be handled by a larger force, but Frieza had specifically assigned it to Vegeta with minimal support. The subtext was obvious: fight the rebels during the triple moon alignment, when staying in base form would be disadvantageous but transforming would likely result in uncontrolled rampage. It was a perfect trap. Reading about your death sentence? Vegeta turned to find Zarbon leaning against the doorframe of the briefing room, his pretty face arranged in a mocking smile. The prince's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his expression neutral. I'm reading about my next mission, Vegeta replied evenly. Nothing more. Of course. Zarbon glided into the room, his movements graceful and precise. You know, I've actually grown somewhat fond of you, little prince. You have such spirit, such determination. It's almost admirable how you refuse to acknowledge the obvious. And what's the obvious, Zarbon? Vegeta asked, his voice dangerously quiet. That you're a liability. That tail of yours, the one you're so proud of, so determined to keep, it's a weakness that's going to get you killed. Lord Frieza has been extraordinarily patient, allowing you to keep it this long. But his patience has limits. Zarbon examined his perfectly manicured nails. This mission is your last chance to prove you're worth the trouble. Fail, and well, let's just say Lord Frieza has contingency plans. I won't fail, Vegeta said flatly. Oh, I hope you're right. I truly do. Zarbon's smile widened. It would be such a shame to have to eliminate the last of the Saiyan royal bloodline. Though between you and me, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Lord Frisia has already begun preparing for that eventuality. Your father's days are numbered as well. One way or another, the Saiyan problem will soon be solved. Rage exploded in Vegeta's chest, so intense it was nearly physical. His power level spiked, his aura flaring golden around him for just a moment before he forced it back down. Zarbin's eyes widened slightly at the display. The prince's power had grown substantially even in the past few months. But Zarbin was still far stronger, and they both knew it. Threaten me all you want, Vegeta said, his voice shaking with suppressed fury. Threaten my father, my race, everything I am. But remember this, Zarbin. I am Prince Vegeta, heir to the Saiyan throne. I carry the blood of warriors who ruled this galaxy before Frisia was even born. And one day, I will surpass him. I will surpass all of you. And when I do... He let the threat hang unfinished, but the promise in his eyes was clear enough. Zarbin laughed, a light sound that held no genuine amusement. Such fire. Yes, you really are entertaining. I'll be watching your mission closely, little prince. I want to see if that legendary Saiyan pride can actually accomplish anything, or if it's just hollow boasting. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and one more thing. The mission briefing mentions minimal support, but I should clarify, you're going alone. No Nappa, no Raditz, no one to help if things go wrong. Lord Frisia insists. He wants to see what you can do, independently. Then he was gone, leaving Vegeta alone with the weight of impossible expectations, and the growing certainty that this mission was designed for him to fail. That night, Vegeta didn't return to his assigned quarters in the base. Instead, he took a small pod and set course for planet Vegeta. The journey would take most of the night, but he needed to see his father. Needed guidance, or reassurance, or maybe just the presence of someone who understood what he was facing. King Vegeta was in the throne room when Vegeta arrived, standing alone before a massive window that looked out over the capital city. The red sky of their homeworld cast everything in shades of crimson and shadow. I heard about your new assignment, the king said without turning around. Frisia's making his move. 3 moons, father? All full simultaneously. And I'm going alone. Vegeta's voice cracked slightly despite his efforts to keep it steady. He's trying to force me to either fail or remove my tail. There's no way to win. There's always a way to win. King Vegeta finally turned to face his son, and Vegeta was struck by how tired he looked. How old? The weight of ruling under Frisia's thumb was wearing him down, aging him before his time. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price for victory. What price? Come with me. Once again, they descended into the secret chamber, that hidden place of ancient knowledge and desperate hope. But this time, King Vegeta didn't go to the main chamber with its carved sovereign ape. Instead, he led Vegeta to a smaller side room that the prince had never even known existed. In this room, the walls were covered not with carvings but with writing, ancient Saiyan script, faded with age but still legible. And in the center of the room stood a pedestal with a crystalline sphere resting upon it. This is the true archive, King Vegeta said quietly. The complete history of the sovereign ape technique, compiled over generations. I haven't shown it to you before because... He paused, struggling with the words. Because once you read it, once you understand the full truth, you can't go back. You can't unknow what you'll learn. Tell me, Vegeta demanded. King Vegeta walked to the nearest wall and began to read, translating the ancient script. The path to the sovereign ape is paved with sacrifice. The warrior must accept the beast, must welcome it as part of themselves rather than fighting against it. The human and the ape must become one, unified in purpose and being. This cannot be achieved through discipline alone. It requires absolute emotional honesty, the willingness to face every dark corner of one's soul, every rage and fear and weakness. Only by accepting all of yourself, both the noble warrior and the savage beast, can true mastery be achieved. He moved to another section. The breaking point is key. Every warrior who achieved the sovereign ape form did so at their moment of greatest desperation, when the choice was between surrender and transformation. When embracing the beast was the only path to survival. In that moment of absolute need, when pride and pragmatism aligned perfectly, the wall between human and ape dissolved. So what you're saying, Vegeta said slowly, is that I can't truly master the oozaru form until I have no other choice. Until I'm in a situation where I have to embrace it completely or die. Yes. King Vegeta's voice was heavy. Which is why this mission might actually be exactly what you need. Not a trap, but an opportunity. 3 moons means 3 times the pressure, 3 times the power, 3 times the challenge. You'll be forced to either achieve true mastery or be consumed by the beast. There's no middle ground anymore. And if I'm consumed? Vegeta asked quietly. If I lose control completely, then you die, probably taking a lot of innocent people with you. And Frieza uses it as justification to eliminate the rest of our race. His father met his eyes. No pressure. The gallows humor almost made Vegeta smile. Almost. So how do I do it? He asked. How do I achieve the breaking point you're talking about? How do I stop fighting the beast and start accepting it? King Vegeta placed his hands on his son's shoulders. You stop thinking of the oozaru as something separate from yourself. Right now, when you transform, you see it as an enemy invading your mind, something to be resisted and controlled. But it's not an invader. It's you. It's the part of you that exists beyond civilization and training, the part that knows only the purity of strength and survival. You have to accept that the beast isn't something to be ashamed of or suppressed. It's your heritage, your power, your birthright. But if I accept it, if I stop resisting, won't I just become the mindless destroyer everyone fears? No. King Vegeta shook his head firmly. Because you're not just accepting the beast, you're unifying it with the warrior. The sovereign ape isn't the beast alone, or the human alone. It's both existing in perfect harmony. The beast's power channeled through the warrior's discipline and purpose. He stepped back, gesturing to the ancient text. Our ancestors understood something we've forgotten. Being Saiyan means embracing both aspects of our nature. We're not humans who happen to transform into apes. We're a species that exists in 2 states, both equally valid, both equally us. The problem is that for generations, we've treated the oozaru form as shameful, dangerous, something to be feared. We've created the division ourselves. Vegeta stared at the ancient writing, trying to absorb what his father was telling him. It went against everything he'd been taught, everything he'd been training for. He'd spent years trying to impose his will on the beast, to dominate and control it. Now his father was saying that control wasn't the answer. Acceptance was. I don't know if I can do that, Vegeta admitted, the words difficult to force out. Admitting uncertainty felt like admitting weakness. I know. King Vegeta's voice was gentle. That's why I didn't tell you before. You weren't ready to hear it. But now, facing this mission, you don't have a choice. You can either try to control the transformation like you've been doing, which might work, but probably won't under this kind of pressure. Or you can try the ancient way. Let go of control and trust in the unity of warrior and beast. And if that doesn't work either? His father's silence was answer enough. Vegeta looked at his tail, that appendage that had caused so much trouble, so much attention, so much danger. He could feel the energy flowing through it, the connection to his Saiyan heritage and power. All he had to do was cut it off, one quick slice, and all of this would be over. No more transformations, no more tests, no more walking the knife's edge between mastery and disaster. But he would also lose part of himself. Not just physically, but spiritually. His tail wasn't just an evolutionary holdover or a biological quirk. It was a symbol of what he was, who he was, what he refused to surrender even in the face of Frieza's overwhelming power. I'll do it, he said finally. I'll face the mission as I am, tail intact. And I'll find a way to achieve what our ancestors did. I'll become the sovereign ape, or I'll die trying. King Vegeta pulled his son into a fierce embrace. I wish I could spare you this. I wish I had been strong enough, smart enough, quick enough to find another way. But I've failed. Now it falls to you, a child asked to achieve what warriors in their prime struggled with. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's what we have. I know. Vegeta returned the embrace, drawing strength from his father's presence. I'll make you proud, father. I'll prove that the royal bloodline isn't just talk and tradition. I'll show Frieza and Zarbon and everyone else that Saiyans aren't beasts to be controlled. We're warriors to be feared. They stayed like that for a long moment, father and son, the last of the Saiyan royal family standing in a chamber of ancient secrets, while an empire built on fear and violence prepared to test them to destruction. Finally, King Vegeta stepped back. He reached up and removed something from around his neck, a small pendant that Vegeta had never seen before. It was made of some dark metal, carved with symbols that matched the ancient script on the walls. This belonged to my father, and his father before him, going back 20 generations, the king said, placing it in Vegeta's hand. It's said to be a fragment of the original Saiyan throne from planet Sadala, before we were forced to flee to this world. Every king has worn it into battle. Now I give it to you. Vegeta looked at the pendant, feeling the weight of centuries in his palm. But you're still king. Shouldn't you? I'm king of a subjugated people, ruling by Frisia's permission, his father said bitterly. But you might actually be something more. You might be the one who finally breaks our chains. So wear it. Let it remind you who you are and what you're fighting for. Vegeta clasped the pendant around his neck, tucking it under his armor where it rested against his heart. He could feel a faint warmth from it, as if the metal held some memory of every king who had worn it before. Thank you, father. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you survive. King Vegeta managed a small smile. Now go. You have 6 days before the mission. Use them well. Train, meditate, and prepare yourself mentally for what's coming. And remember, when the moment comes, when you're standing beneath 3 full moons with power flooding through you and the beast howling for release, let go. Stop fighting. Trust in the unity of what you are. Vegeta nodded, then turned and left the chamber. He had 6 days to prepare for the most important battle of his life. 6 days to transform from a prince struggling with his heritage into something the universe hadn't seen in generations. 6 days to become the sovereign ape, or die trying. Behind him, King Vegeta stood alone in the chamber of ancient secrets, looking up at the carved image of the great ape that stood proud and aware. He had just sent his son into a situation that would likely kill him. But he had also given him the only chance at true mastery that existed. Forgive me, he whispered to the empty chamber, to the ghosts of ancestors and the weight of a dying race's hopes. Forgive me for placing this burden on a child. But we have no one else. We have nothing else. He has to succeed. He has to. The great ape carved into the stone seemed to watch him with knowing eyes, a silent witness to the desperation of kings and the price of pride. And somewhere in the darkness of space, on a planet with 3 moons and rebels who had no idea they were about to become part of a test that would determine the fate of an entire species, the countdown continued. 6 days until the triple alignment. 6 days until Prince Vegeta would face his ultimate test. 6 days until the beast within would either be mastered or consume him entirely. The future of the Saiyan race hung in the balance, resting on the shoulders of an 11-year-old boy with a tail and too much pride to surrender, even to the inevitable. The training chamber deep beneath planet Vegeta's royal palace had seen countless hours of secret practice, but nothing like the intensity of the past 6 days. Prince Vegeta stood in the center of the ancient room, his body covered in sweat and bruises, his breathing heavy but controlled. Around him, the stone walls bore fresh scars from energy blasts and physical impacts, evidence of his relentless preparation. King Vegeta observed from the shadows, his expression a mixture of pride and deep concern. His son had barely slept in the days since learning about the Tigress formation, instead pushing himself through transformation after transformation, trying desperately to internalize the lessons of their ancestors. Again, Vegeta commanded, not waiting for his father's approval. The king raised another power ball, the artificial moon's glow filling the chamber with blood's waves. Vegeta didn't resist the transformation this time. He welcomed it, just as his father had instructed. The change rippled through his body with familiar violence, muscles expanding, bones lengthening, fur erupting across his skin, consciousness fragmenting as the beast surged forward. But this time, instead of fighting to maintain his human awareness against the ape's fury, Vegeta tried something different. He let the rage come. He accepted it as part of himself, not an invader but a fundamental aspect of his nature. I am the warrior. I am the beast. We are one. The great ape Vegeta's eyes flickered, red with primal fury, then briefly clear with rational thought, then red again. The struggle was visible, a war playing out behind those massive eyes. His huge fists clenched and unclenched, his tail lashed wildly, and a deep growl rumbled from his chest. For nearly 3 minutes he maintained that precarious balance, not truly in control, but not completely lost either. It was progress, real progress, but still not enough. Then the power ball's effect faded, and Vegeta reverted, collapsing to his knees with exhaustion. Better, King Vegeta said, moving to his son's side. Each time, you hold on a little longer. It's still not enough, Vegeta gasped, his tail dragging on the stone floor. 3 minutes of partial awareness won't help me against rebels and triple moons. I need complete mastery, and I need it now. You can't force enlightenment, my son. The breakthrough will come when it comes. I don't have time for mystical nonsense. Vegeta's frustration boiled over, his aura flaring. The mission launches tomorrow. Tomorrow, father. And I'm still nowhere near ready. The king placed a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the boy trembling with exhaustion and emotion. Then perhaps you need to stop training and start thinking. Come with me. He led Vegeta not deeper into the training chamber but upward, through the hidden passages of the palace, until they emerged onto one of the highest balconies. The red sky of planet Vegeta stretched above them, and below, the capital city sprawled in all directions, a testament to Saiyan civilization, such as it was under Frieza's rule. Do you know why I chose this place for our final conversation before your mission? King Vegeta asked. Vegeta shook his head, too tired to guess at his father's intent. Because from here, you can see everything our people have built. But also everything we've lost. The king gestured toward the horizon. Before Frieza, before we became his warriors, we were conquerors in our own right. We chose which worlds to take, which peoples to subjugate. We weren't perfect. We were violent and proud and often cruel. But we were free. He turned to face his son. The oozaru form represents that freedom. It's power without chains, strength without apology. That's why Frieza fears it. Not because it's uncontrollable. He's destroyed countless uncontrollable threats. He fears it because he recognizes what it represents. Saiyan power that answers to no one but itself. I don't understand what you're trying to tell me, Vegeta said, though something in his father's words resonated with a truth he couldn't quite grasp. I'm telling you that mastery of the oozaru isn't about control, it's about freedom. You've been approaching it wrong, trying to impose discipline and restraint on something that exists beyond those concepts. The ancient Saiyans who achieved the sovereign ape form didn't do it by controlling the beast. They did it by freeing themselves completely, human and ape alike, and then choosing, in that state of absolute freedom, to direct their power with purpose. King Vegeta's eyes held an intensity that demanded attention. Tomorrow, when you stand beneath 3 moons and feel that power flooding through you, don't try to control it. Don't try to restrain it or channel it or any of the things we've been practicing. Instead, just be. Be everything you are, prince and beast, warrior and savage, civilized and primal. Accept it all, embrace it all, and then, from that place of total acceptance, choose what you want to do with that power. That sounds like a good way to lose myself completely, Vegeta said quietly. Perhaps. Or perhaps it's the only way to truly find yourself. His father smiled sadly. I wish I had better guidance to offer. But this is as far as my knowledge takes us. The rest you'll have to discover on your own. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the red sky darken as planet Vegeta's rotation carried them toward night. Finally, Vegeta spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I fail, father? What if I transform and lose control, and Frieza uses it as the excuse he's been waiting for? Then we die, King Vegeta said bluntly. All of us, you, me, every Saiyan in the Empire. Frieza will eliminate our race and move on to the next potential threat. That's the reality we live with every single day. No pressure, Vegeta muttered, echoing their earlier dark humor. No, his father agreed. No pressure at all. Just the survival of an entire species resting on an 11-year-old boy's ability to become something that hasn't existed in centuries. He pulled Vegeta close. I'm sorry, my son. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you. Sorry for the impossible situation we're in. Sorry that you never got to just be a child. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that you're strong enough to carry this weight. Grateful that you refuse to surrender. Grateful that you're my son. Vegeta felt tears threatening and furiously blinked them away. Tears were weakness. Emotion was weakness. but his father's arms around him, the knowledge that this might be the last time they saw each other, the overwhelming weight of expectations and destiny. It all crashed over him like a wave. "I won't fail," he said, his voice fierce despite the tears he couldn't completely suppress. "I'll master the oozaru form. I'll prove that Saiyans are more than Frieza's tools. I'll make you proud." "You already have," King Vegeta said softly. "Everything else is just details." The next morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. Vegeta stood in the palace's private landing bay, checking his armor one final time before boarding the small attack pod that would carry him to Tigress 4. The armor was standard Saiyan Elite issue, white and gold, with the royal crest emblazoned on the chest. But underneath, against his skin, rested the ancient pendant his father had given him. Nappa and Raditz had arrived to see him off, along with a handful of other elite warriors. Their presence was both comforting and troubling. It reminded Vegeta that his success or failure would be witnessed, recorded, and judged. "The rebels on Tigress 4 are well armed and dug in," Nappa was saying, his voice professional despite the concern in his eyes. "They have energy weapons comparable to standard Frieza Force issue, and they've fortified their base in the northern mountains. Under normal circumstances, I'd recommend a squad of at least 12 warriors for this mission. But these aren't normal circumstances," Vegeta said flatly. "This is a test. Frieza wants to see if I can handle a real threat while dealing with the triple moon alignment. The astronomical data shows all 3 moons will be full for approximately 6 hours, Raditz added. "That's a long time to maintain control if you choose to transform. Are you certain you're ready for this, Prince?" Vegeta's tail tightened around his waist. "I don't have a choice. Ready or not, the mission happens. You could request backup," Nappa suggested carefully. "Zarbon said you're going alone, but technically, as Prince, you have the authority to, and the moment I request backup, Frieza will see it as a mission that I can't handle the mission on my own. That I'm weak. That the tail is indeed a liability." Vegeta shook his head. "No, I go alone, and I succeed alone. That's the only way to definitively prove what I'm capable of." The warriors exchanged glances but didn't argue further. They understood the political calculations as well as Vegeta did. This mission was designed to have no winning moves, only varying degrees of defeat. The best Vegeta could do was choose which defeat would be least catastrophic, or find a way to turn the trap into a triumph. "The pod is ready, Prince," a technician called from the boarding ramp. Vegeta took a deep breath, then turned to face Nappa and Raditz. "If I don't return, you'll return," Nappa interrupted firmly. "You're Saiyan royalty. We don't die easy, but if I don't," Vegeta continued, "tell my father, tell him I tried. Tell him I understood what he was trying to teach me, even if I couldn't quite achieve it." "You can tell him yourself when you get back," Raditz said, attempting a confidence he clearly didn't feel. Vegeta nodded, not trusting himself to say anything more. He walked up the boarding ramp, the pod's interior computer already preparing for launch. As the hatch began to close, he caught one last glimpse of the warriors gathered to see him off, their faces marked with worry and pride in equal measure. Then the hatch sealed, and he was alone. The pod launched with a force that would have crushed a normal being, but Vegeta barely registered it. His mind was already on the mission ahead, running through scenarios and possibilities. 6 hours beneath 3 full moons. 6 hours of resisting transformation, or embracing it, and hoping his training was sufficient to maintain control. The journey to Tigress 4 would take 3 days. 3 days alone with his thoughts, his fears, and the growing certainty that everything was about to change, one way or another. Vegeta spent the first day of the journey in meditation, trying to center himself and reinforce the mental disciplines his father had taught him. He focused on his tail, on the sensation of energy flowing through it, on the connection it represented between his current state and the beast that lurked beneath. "I am Prince Vegeta," he repeated mentally. "I am the heir to the Saiyan throne. I am warrior and beast, civilized and savage. I am all of these things, and they are all me." But doubt crept in despite his efforts. 3 minutes of partial control was his current limit. 3 minutes out of a potential 6 hours of exposure to triple moons. The math was not encouraging. On the second day, he tried a different approach. Instead of meditation, he trained, pushing his body through combat exercises in the pod's limited space, focusing on integrating his tail into every movement. The tail wasn't just a balance tool or an occasional weapon, it was an extension of his will, a physical manifestation of his Saiyan nature. He practiced fighting blind, relying on his tail to sense movements and energy. He practiced channeling ki through his tail, directing energy blasts from it as easily as from his hands. He practiced wrapping it around imaginary opponents, using it to throw and restrain. Every movement, every technique reinforced the same message: the tail was not separate from him. It was him, as much as his arms or legs or fighting spirit. On the third day, as Tigress 4 loomed closer in the pod's viewport, Vegeta stopped training and simply sat, his tail unwrapped and hanging loose, his mind quiet and focused on a single question. Who am I really? Not Prince Vegeta, though that was true. Not a warrior in Frieza's army, though that was also true. Not a student of ancient techniques, not his father's hope, not a symbol of Saiyan pride. All of those were roles he played, identities he wore. But underneath all of that, at the core of his being, who was he? The answer came not in words but in feeling, a deep, primal certainty that transcended language. He was strength. He was pride. He was the refusal to yield even when yielding was rational. He was the fire that burned in every Saiyan heart, the fury that could destroy worlds or protect them, depending on how it was directed. And the beast, the great ape that emerged under the full moon, wasn't something foreign to that core identity. It was that identity expressed in its purest, most undiluted form. I've been thinking about this wrong, Vegeta realized with sudden clarity. I've been treating the transformation like a curse or a weapon. But it's either. It's just me, the me that exists without civilization's constraints, without training's discipline, without pride's armor. Raw and honest and real. The revelation should have been frightening, but instead it brought a strange calm. If the beast was just him, then mastering it didn't mean controlling something external. It meant accepting himself completely, all the rage and violence and destructive power included, and then choosing how to direct that authentic self. The pod's computer chimed, breaking his meditation. Approaching Tigress 4. Arrival in 30 minutes. Vegeta opened his eyes and looked at his hands, scarred from years of training, small but powerful, capable of destruction far beyond what their size suggested. These hands had killed thousands. They had served a tyrant. They had defended his pride when reason said he should surrender. In a few hours, these hands would become massive paws capable of crushing buildings. His body would grow to 50 feet tall, his strength would increase tenfold, and his mind would remain his own. It had to. There was no other option. Landing sequence initiated, the computer announced. Vegeta stood and began his final preparations, checking his armor, his scouter, his emergency supplies. But the real preparation was internal, the acceptance of what he was about to become, the willingness to let go of control in order to achieve true mastery. Warrior and beast, he thought, touching the pendant beneath his armor. Civilization and savagery. Prince and destroyer. All of it is me, and I will not be ashamed of any of it. The pod broke through Tigress Ivy's atmosphere, flames engulfing the viewport as friction heated the hull. Below, Vegeta could see the planet's surface, mountainous terrain with 3 distinct mountain ranges forming a rough triangle around a central valley. According to the mission briefing, the rebel base was hidden in the northern range, and above the planet, visible even in daylight, hung 3 moons. They weren't full yet. That wouldn't happen for another 4 hours, as the planet's rotation brought the mission area into alignment with all 3 satellites simultaneously. 4 hours to complete the mission conventionally, or accept that transformation was inevitable and try to use it as an advantage rather than a liability. The pod landed with violent force, its impact cratering the rocky ground. Vegeta emerged into the thin atmosphere of Tigress 4, his scouter immediately scanning for power signatures. The planet's gravity was slightly higher than standard, but nothing a Saiyan couldn't easily handle. Multiple contacts appeared on his scouter, dozens of them, clustered in the northern mountains. Power levels ranged from 1,000 to 3,500, with a few exceptional individuals reading over 5,000. Significant by normal standards, but nothing Vegeta couldn't handle in his base form, under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. Because in 4 hours, those 3 moons would align, and everything would change. Vegeta began moving toward the northern mountains, his pace deliberately measured. He was in no rush. In fact, part of him wanted to delay the confrontation, to arrive at the rebel base exactly when the moons reached full alignment. If transformation was inevitable, better to face it when he could use the power against his enemies rather than fighting to resist it. The landscape of Tigris 4 was harsh and beautiful, red rock formations carved by wind and time, creating natural sculptures that caught the binary star's light in spectacular ways. Under different circumstances, Vegeta might have appreciated the stark beauty. But now, all he could think about was the mission ahead and the test that would determine his future. His scouter chimed again. Incoming communication from Frieza Force Command. Vegeta grimaced but activated the receiver. Zarbon's face appeared in the scouter's display, his pretty features arranged in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Prince Vegeta, I trust you've arrived safely on Tigris 4? Obviously, since I'm talking to you, Vegeta replied shortly. Such hostility. I'm simply checking on your progress. Lord Frieza is very interested in this mission, you understand. Very interested in seeing how you handle the unique circumstances. Tell Lord Frieza he'll get his show, Vegeta said coldly. I'll eliminate the rebels and return with confirmation of mission completion. I'm certain you will. Or, Zarbon's smile widened. Or you'll provide us with definitive proof that certain Saiyan traits are simply too dangerous to accommodate. Either way, this mission will resolve some long-standing questions. The communication cut off before Vegeta could respond. He stood for a moment, rage boiling in his chest. They were betting on his failure. Hoping for it. Probably planning their next moves based on the assumption that he would lose control and prove them right. Then I'll prove them wrong, he thought fiercely. I'll show them that Saiyan pride isn't just empty boasting. That the royal bloodline means something. That I am not a beast to be controlled or eliminated. He continued toward the mountains, his tail swishing behind him with determined purpose. The rebel base was still several miles away, but his scouter was tracking multiple scout parties. Forward positions meant to detect approaching threats. Time to announce his presence. Vegeta raised one hand, energy gathering in his palm. With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent a blast of ki streaking toward the nearest scout position. The explosion was visible even from this distance, a pillar of smoke and fire rising from the mountainside. His scouter lit up with activity as the rebels went on high alert, power signatures moving rapidly as they organized their defenses. Good. Let them prepare. Let them gather their forces and mount their best resistance. It wouldn't matter. Vegeta took to the air, his white aura flaring around him as he flew toward the northern mountains. The rebels would be expecting a fight, preparing for a conventional assault from Frieza's forces. They had no idea what was really coming. The rebel base was more impressive than Vegeta had expected. Carved into the mountainside itself, it consisted of multiple levels connected by reinforced tunnels, with heavy weapons emplacements covering every approach. As Vegeta flew closer, energy cannons opened fire, filling the air with deadly blasts. He dodged casually, his superior speed making the attacks seem to move in slow motion. These rebels were well equipped and well trained, but they were still no match for a Saiyan elite. Even a young one. Vegeta landed directly in front of the main entrance, a massive blast door designed to withstand heavy assault. Around him, rebel soldiers scrambled into position, their weapons trained on the small figure who had just destroyed one of their scout posts and flown through their defensive fire like it was nothing. Surrender, Vegeta called out, his voice amplified by his scouter's external speakers. Lay down your weapons, abandon this base, and Lord Frieza might show mercy. The response came in the form of concentrated fire from every weapon that could draw a line on his position. Energy blasts, projectiles, some kind of sonic weapon that made his ears ring, all of it focused on eliminating the single intruder. Vegeta's aura flared brighter, deflecting or absorbing the attacks. When the barrage finally ceased, the rebels forced to pause and recharge their weapons. He was still standing, completely unharmed, with a smile that held no humor. Wrong answer. He moved like lightning, closing the distance to the nearest group of soldiers before they could react. His attacks were precise and efficient, not killing blows, but disabling strikes that removed threats without unnecessary casualties. Despite everything, Despite the rage he was cultivating for the transformation to come, Vegeta found himself holding back from lethal force. Strange, he thought as he disabled another soldier with a strike to the shoulder. When did I start caring about unnecessary deaths? But he knew the answer. It had started on planet Shik, watching an entire civilization die for Frisia's convenience. It had solidified during his meditation on the journey here, when he'd confronted the question of who he really was beneath all the roles and expectations. He was a warrior, yes. A killer, when necessary. But he wasn't a mindless destroyer. The beast might be part of him, but so was the prince who recognized the difference between necessary violence and cruelty for its own sake. The rebels, to their credit, didn't give up easily. Even as Vegeta cut through their defensive lines, even as it became clear they were hopelessly outmatched, they continued fighting. Not because they thought they could win, but because surrender meant betraying everything they'd built, everything they believed in. Pride, Vegeta realized. They're fighting out of pride, just like Father said I would need to do. They'd rather die free than live as slaves. The thought made him pause for just a moment, long enough for one of the rebel leaders, a tall, scarred warrior with a power level around 5,000, to land a solid hit on his jaw. The impact barely hurt, but the audacity of it earned Vegeta's respect. You're strong, the rebel leader said, breathing hard. Stronger than anyone I've fought before. But you're alone, and we are many. Eventually, you'll tire, and we'll overwhelm you. Vegeta touched his jaw where he'd been struck, checking for blood. There was none. You're brave. Foolish, but brave. Unfortunately for you, I'm not here to fight conventional warfare. He looked up at the sky, where the twin suns were beginning to set, their light painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple, and rising behind them, growing brighter as darkness fell, were the 3 moons of Tigris 4, still not quite full. But close. Very close. What are you looking at? The rebel leader asked, following Vegeta's gaze. Then his eyes widened as he saw the moons. Wait, you're Saiyan. And that tail, no? You wouldn't. Not even Frisia's forces would be insane enough to deliberately transform during a mission? Vegeta interrupted. That depends on whether the warrior has control over the transformation or not. He smiled, and this time there was genuine amusement in the expression. I guess we're all about to find out which category I fall into. He turned and walked away from the base entrance, moving to a clear area where he would have room for what was coming. Behind him, he could hear urgent communications as the rebels tried to understand what was happening, tried to prepare for a threat they couldn't possibly anticipate. Vegeta checked his scouter. 90 minutes until the moons reached perfect alignment. 90 minutes until the Blutz waves would be at their maximum, making transformation not just likely but inevitable for any Saiyan who looked up. He could try to finish the mission before then. Storm the base in his current form, eliminate the leadership, force a surrender. It was possible, even likely that he could succeed, but that would be the safe choice. The choice that avoided the real test. And Vegeta hadn't come all this way, trained all those hours, carried all these expectations just to play it safe. This is it, he thought, touching the pendant beneath his armor. The moment Father talked about. The breaking point where I either achieve mastery or lose everything. No more practice transformations in a safe chamber. This is real, and the consequences are absolute. He sat down cross-legged on the rocky ground, his tail unwrapping from his waist to rest comfortably behind him. The rebels watched from their fortifications, confused and wary. Some were calling for artillery strikes, but their leaders held them back, sensing that something significant was happening and wanting to understand it before acting. Vegeta closed his eyes and began to meditate, using the techniques his father had taught him. Feel the tail. Focus on the breath. Clear the mind of everything but the present moment. Accept what you are, warrior and beast, prince and savage, all of it unified and whole. The minutes passed slowly. The twin suns sank below the horizon. Darkness fell across the mountains of Tigris 4, and the 3 moons rose higher, their combined light bright enough to read by, bright enough to trigger the ancient Saiyan response written into every cell of Vegeta's body. He could feel it starting, the tingle in his tail, the acceleration of his heartbeat, the primal stirring of power that wanted desperately to be released. But he didn't resist it. He didn't try to push it down or control it or contain it, he welcomed it. Come, he thought, opening himself to the transformation. Come, and we'll see what we truly are together. The rebel leader, watching from the base entrance, suddenly understood. Everyone inside. Now. Seal all exterior doors. This is not a drill. We're about to face an oozaru. The rebels scrambled to comply, but some remained to watch, unable to look away from the scene unfolding before them. The small figure sitting in meditation was starting to glow with an aura of golden energy, and the moons, all three of them, had reached perfect fullness, pouring blood's waves down upon the planet like invisible rain. And then Vegeta looked up. The transformation hit like a tsunami. His body erupted in size, muscles expanding exponentially, bones lengthening and thickening, further color of shadow sprouting from every inch of skin. His armor shredded, unable to contain his expanding form. His power level, which had been hovering around 18,000, skyrocketed to well over 180,000 in a matter of seconds. The Great Ape Vegeta rose to his full height, nearly 60 feet of pure Saiyan power and rage. He threw back his massive head and roared, a sound that shook the mountains and sent rocks cascading down from the peaks. It was the roar of a predator, a destroyer, a force of nature that recognized no authority but its own strength. The rebels who had stayed to watch now fled in terror, scrambling for the safety of the base's interior. This was beyond anything they'd prepared for, beyond anything they'd imagined. They were facing a monster from Legends, a creature that could level their entire base with a casual swipe of its massive hands. But then something unexpected happened. The great ape's roar cut off mid-bellow. Its massive eyes, which had been glowing red with mindless fury, flickered. Red, then a momentary flash of clarity, then red again. The beast's hands, which had been raised to strike at the mountain itself, slowly lowered. And then, in a voice like thunder, rough and distorted but unmistakably conscious and aware, the great ape spoke. I am Prince Vegeta. Inside the rebel base, listening through their surveillance equipment, dozens of warriors froze in disbelief. Oozaru didn't talk. Oozaru didn't think. They destroyed until they exhausted themselves or were killed. That was the fundamental truth everyone knew about the Saiyan transformation. But this one had just spoken its own name. The great ape Vegeta stood still for a long moment, as if testing itself, verifying that consciousness remained. Its tail swished behind it, not wildly, not with the random movement of a beast, but with deliberate, controlled motion. Then it looked down at its massive hands, turning them over, examining them as if seeing them for the first time. A low rumble came from its chest, not a growl of rage, but something that might have been wonder. It worked, the great ape said, its voice still rough but growing clearer. Father, it actually worked. This was it. This was the breakthrough Vegeta had been chasing for years. He was transformed, standing beneath 3 full moons with power flooding through every cell of his body, and he was still himself. The beast was there. He could feel its fury, its hunger for destruction, but it wasn't in control. Neither was it suppressed or denied. Warrior and beast, existing together, unified in purpose. The sovereign ape. The legend made real. Vegeta. The great ape Vegeta, conscious and aware, turned his attention to the rebel base. With his enhanced size, his scouter had been destroyed in the transformation, but he didn't need it. He could sense the power signatures inside the mountain, could feel the fear radiating from the warriors who had just witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. Come out, he called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. Come out and face me, or I'll tear your base apart stone by stone. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the main blast door began to open, and the rebel leader emerged, accompanied by a dozen of his finest warriors. They held their weapons ready, but there was no hope in their eyes, only the determination to face death with dignity. You're in control, the rebel leader said, his voice steady despite his obvious fear. An oozaru with conscious thought. I didn't think such a thing was possible. Neither did anyone else, Vegeta rumbled. His massive form made every word resonate with physical force. But I am Prince Vegeta, heir to the Saiyan throne. I do not surrender to my own power. I master it. He took a step forward, the impact of his foot sending tremors through the ground. The rebels tensed, preparing for the attack they knew they couldn't survive. But Vegeta stopped. In his transformed state, with power beyond anything he'd possessed before, with the beast's fury harmonized with the warrior's discipline, something had become crystal clear. These rebels were fighting for their freedom. They had defied Frieza, had built something of their own, had refused to kneel to a tyrant even when it meant certain death. In their own way, they were doing exactly what Vegeta himself was trying to do. Prove that they were more than what those in power wanted them to be. What am I doing? The thought was his own, fully his own, not distorted by the beast or confused by transformation. I'm here destroying people who have more in common with me than with the tyrant I serve. I'm proving my mastery by eliminating the very kind of spirit I'm trying to preserve in myself. The realization was profound and disturbing. For years, Vegeta had followed orders, conquered planets, eliminated resistance without questioning the morality of it. That was what warriors did. That was what survival required. But if the whole point of mastering the oozaru form was to be truly free, to exist without chains or limitations, then didn't that freedom include the choice of who to fight and why? The rebel leader saw something change in the great ape's eyes. The red glow had faded entirely, replaced by the clear awareness of rational thought. And in that awareness, he saw something unexpected: uncertainty. You're questioning your mission, the rebel leader said quietly. Even in that form, even with all that power, you're questioning whether we deserve to die. You're brave, Vegeta said slowly, his massive voice thoughtful. You fight Frieza even though you know you can't win. You've built something here, something that matters to you, and I'm supposed to destroy it because a tyrant commands it. That's the price of serving Empire, the rebel leader replied. You become its weapon, carrying out violence you might not choose for yourself. We were in that position once. Then we decided that freedom, even with the certainty of death, was better than comfortable slavery. Vegeta stood in silence, his enormous form blocking out the moonlight, casting the rebels in shadow. Inside his mind, that miraculous, maintained consciousness that shouldn't have survived transformation. A war was taking place. He could complete the mission. Destroy the base, eliminate the rebels, return to Frieza with proof of his mastery and success. It would prove everything his father hoped for, demonstrate that Saiyans could control their most powerful form. By time for their race to grow stronger. But it would also mean remaining Frieza's weapon. Continuing to serve the very kind of tyranny he was supposedly training to overcome. Using his hard-won freedom to enforce someone else's will. What would father want me to do? Vegeta wondered. But he already knew the answer. His father had sent him on this mission knowing it was a trap, had given him the tools to survive it, had taught him that true mastery meant accepting all aspects of himself, and one of those aspects was the ability to choose. To decide for himself what his power would be used for. The decision crystallized with sudden, absolute clarity. I'm not going to kill you, Vegeta announced, his words making the rebels tense with confusion. Any of you? This mission is over, but not in the way Frieza expected. What are you talking about? The rebel leader asked warily. I came here to prove I could master the oozaru transformation. And I have. You're all witnessing it right now. I'm conscious, aware, and in control despite 3 full moons flooding me with more blood waves than any Saiyan has faced in generations. Vegeta's massive tail swished behind him. That was the real test. Whether I killed you or not was just Frieza's excuse to observe it. He turned away from the base, looking up at the 3 moons that hung in the sky. So I'm going to give Frieza his show. I'm going to demonstrate exactly what a controlled oozaru is capable of. But not by destroying brave warriors who dare to resist tyranny. Then what? The rebel leader began, but stopped as he saw where the great ape Vegeta was looking, not at the rebel base. At the mountains themselves. Your base is hidden in these mountains because they provide natural defensive positions, Vegeta said, his voice carrying a growing excitement. But they also make you vulnerable. Frieza knows where you are. Even if I spare you today, he'll just send another force. Larger, more brutal, impossible to resist. We know, the rebel leader said quietly. We've always known we're living on borrowed time. Then stop borrowing, Vegeta said, and his massive hands began to glow with energy. Start taking. I'm going to give you something Frieza can't ignore, can't easily overcome, and can't blame you for. Because it will be my doing, not yours. Before anyone could question what he meant, Vegeta unleashed his power, but not at the rebel base. At the mountains surrounding it, enormous blasts of energy erupted from his hands, each one powerful enough to level a city. They struck the mountain peaks, detonating with force that turned stone to powder and sent avalanches cascading down every slope. The rebels scrambled for cover as the world shook, as mountains that had stood for millions of years were systematically demolished by a 50-foot-tall ape, whose power seemed limitless. Vegeta worked with methodical precision, channeling the beast's destructive instincts through the warrior's tactical awareness. He wasn't just destroying randomly. He was reshaping the terrain itself, collapsing certain peaks while leaving others standing, creating new barriers and obstacles that would make this valley far more defensible than before. And he was doing it all while maintaining perfect control, never slipping into mindless rage, never losing track of where the rebels were or what he was trying to accomplish. This was mastery, not just of the transformation, but of power itself. The display went on for nearly an hour. By the time Vegeta finally stopped, breathing heavily from the exertion, the landscape had been completely transformed. Where there had been 3 mountain ranges forming a triangle, there was now a complex maze of stone barriers, defensive positions, and fortified natural structures that would make any assault exponentially more difficult. And in the center, untouched and intact, stood the rebel base. Vegeta reverted to his normal form, the transformation releasing as the enormous expenditure of energy depleted his reserves. He stood naked among the rubble. His armor had been destroyed in the transformation, breathing hard but with a smile of genuine triumph on his face. He had done it. Maintained consciousness throughout the entire transformation. Channeled the beast's power with the warrior's precision. Achieved what hadn't been accomplished in generations. And he had done it by refusing to be Frieza's weapon. The rebel leader approached cautiously, his expression a mixture of awe, confusion, and wary hope. Why? Why would you help us? You're one of Frieza's warriors. If he finds out, he's going to find out, Vegeta interrupted, accepting a cloak one of the rebels offered to cover himself. My scouter is broken, but Frieza's monitoring satellites recorded everything. He'll see that I transformed, maintained control, and then used that power to fortify your position rather than destroy it. You'll be punished. Maybe killed, maybe. Vegeta's smile didn't fade. But I'll have proven something far more important than my ability to follow orders. I'll have proven that a Saiyan with a tail isn't a liability or a weapon. We're warriors who can choose our own path. And that's what Frieza really fears. Not the transformation itself, but what it represents. Power that answers to no one but itself. He looked up at the 3 moons, still full and bright. Besides, I have new armor in my pod. And a message to send to a certain tyrant about the difference between control and mastery. The rebel leader studied Vegeta's face for a long moment, then slowly smiled. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most foolish. Probably both, Vegeta admitted. But I'm also the first Saiyan in generations to achieve the sovereign ape form. And I didn't do it by destroying brave warriors to please a tyrant. I did it by choosing, for myself, what my power would be used for. He turned to leave, then paused. When Frieza sends another force, and he will, you won't be able to hold forever. These fortifications will buy you time, but not freedom. For that you'll need allies, powerful ones. Are you offering to be one of those allies? The rebel leader asked carefully. Not yet. I'm still too valuable to Frieza to risk open rebellion. But... Vegeta's tail swished behind him. But things are changing. The Saiyans are waking up to what we've become, what we've lost. And when we finally move against Frieza, we'll need warriors who understand what we're fighting for. Warriors who chose freedom over safety. We'll be here, the rebel leader promised. However long it takes, we'll be here. Vegeta nodded and walked away, heading back toward where his pod was waiting. Behind him, the rebels began to assess their new fortifications, to understand the gift they'd been given and the implied promise that came with it. Above, the 3 moons hung in perfect alignment, bearing witness to something unprecedented. A Saiyan who had mastered the beast within not by controlling it, but by accepting it completely, and then choosing, with conscious awareness and absolute clarity, how to direct that power. The sovereign ape had awakened. And the universe would never be quite the same. 3 days later, Prince Vegeta stood in the command center of Frieza's regional base, wearing new armor and facing a holographic projection of the tyrant himself. The journey back had given him time to prepare for this confrontation, to steel himself for whatever punishment Frieza would decree. But if Vegeta had expected rage or immediate retaliation, he was disappointed. Instead, Frieza looked almost intrigued. "Prince Vegeta," the tyrant said, his voice pleasant as always. "I've reviewed the surveillance footage from your mission. Quite the performance, I must say. Very illuminating." "The rebels still live," Vegeta said bluntly. "I failed the mission by that measure. Did you?" Frieza's tail swished behind him. "Your mission was to deal with the rebels on Tigris 4. You dealt with them by making their position so heavily fortified that they're no longer a tactical priority. One could argue that's actually more efficient than elimination. They're contained, and my forces can focus elsewhere." Vegeta wasn't fooled by the reasonable tone. "You wanted me to fail. To lose control and prove that Saiyans with tails are too dangerous to be permitted. I wanted to see what you were capable of," Frieza corrected. "And now I know. You achieved something I didn't think possible. Conscious awareness during full oozaru transformation. Congratulations, Prince. You've made yourself extraordinarily valuable." The word valuable hung in the air, heavy with implication. Vegeta understood immediately. He wasn't being punished because Frieza saw a use for his new ability. The tyrant would let him live, let him keep his tail, because a Saiyan who could control the Great Ape form was a weapon worth keeping. "For now, I'm assigning you to more significant missions," Frieza continued. "Now that you've proven your control, I want to see what you can accomplish with it. Zarbon will provide the details." The hologram flickered out, leaving Vegeta alone with his thoughts. He had survived. He had proven his mastery, but he had also made himself indispensable to the very tyrant he was supposedly training to eventually oppose. Is this victory or defeat? He wondered. I achieved the Sovereign Ape form, but I'm still Frieza's servant. I chose my own path on Tigris 4, but it's a path that still leads through the Empire. His hand touched the pendant beneath his armor, the fragment of the ancient Saiyan throne, passed down through generations of kings. His father had said it would remind him what he was fighting for, but standing in Frieza's base, having just proven himself valuable enough to keep alive, Vegeta realized that fighting for something meant being patient enough to survive until the moment was right. The sleeping giant has awakened, he thought, remembering his father's words about the sovereign ape. But giants don't just wake up and start destroying. They wake up, assess their situation, and plan. And when they finally move, empires fall. He would continue serving Frieza. He would take the significant missions, prove his worth, and buy time for himself and his race to grow stronger. But now, he had something Frieza couldn't take away, the certainty that he could transform into the great ape and remain himself, conscious and choosing. That knowledge changed everything. Somewhere in the darkness of space, on planet Vegeta's red-lit surface, King Vegeta received word of his son's success. He stood alone in the secret chamber, looking up at the ancient carving of the sovereign ape, and allowed himself a moment of pure, undiluted pride. His son had done it. Against all odds, despite impossible pressure, the boy had achieved what hadn't been accomplished in generations. The sleeping giant had indeed awakened, and when it finally chose to stand and face the tyrant who thought himself invincible, the universe would shake. But that was a problem for another day. For now, King Vegeta simply stood in the Chamber of Ancient Secrets, and whispered a prayer of thanks to ancestors who had preserved the knowledge that had saved his son's life. The sovereign ape lived again, and somewhere in the cold calculation of his fortress, Frieza looked at the surveillance footage one more time, watching a 50-foot-tall ape reshape mountains with conscious precision, and felt something he hadn't experienced in many years. Not fear. Not yet, but the first, cold whisper of it.